She said it in the driveway, not inside the house, not over dinner, not even with the engine off. Elena kept the car running, her hand still on the gear shift, eyes forward through the windshield like she was reading directions off the glass. This trip made me realize I don't want you anymore. No emotion, no hesitation. I stood there with her suitcase in my hand, the roller wheel still spinning slightly from where I'd pulled it from the trunk. The January cold bit through my shirt, but I didn't move, didn't blink. "All right," I said. That's when her head turned, just slightly, like she'd expected resistance and my calm had thrown off her internal script. "That's it?" she asked. "Just all right?" "What else do you want me to say?" Her fingers drummed once against the steering wheel. Most people would ask why, or argue. Would that change anything? No. Then what's the point? She studied me for a moment, and I watched something like confusion cross her face. Elena had prepared for this conversation, probably rehearsed it on the plane ride home from wherever she'd actually been. Seattle, she'd said, though her luggage tag read Phoenix. I'd noticed that when I grabbed the bag, didn't mention it. "I'll stay in the guest room until I figure out next steps," she said, putting the car in park finally. "We can be adults about this." "Sure." She got out, took her suitcase from my hand without looking at me, and walked into our house like she was checking into a hotel. Polite, distant, efficient. I stood in the driveway for another minute, watching my breath cloud in the air, feeling the cold seep into my bones. The neighbors' Christmas lights were still up across the street, blinking red and green in the growing dark. My name is Daniel Hargreave. I'm a financial compliance analyst, which means I spend my days looking for patterns other people miss. Inconsistencies. Numbers that don't line up, stories that change in the retelling. I'm very good at my job. Elena is a corporate travel consultant, which means she's gone a lot. Airports, hotels, client meetings in cities I've never visited. We met 7 years ago at a conference in Chicago. She was presenting on sustainable business travel practices. I was there because my company was vetting vendors. She was brilliant, confident. The kind of woman who walks into a room and owns it without trying. I was the quiet guy in the back who noticed she referenced the wrong quarter's data in slide 17 and mentioned it to her afterward, not to embarrass her, just because accuracy mattered to me. She bought me a drink, said most men wouldn't have caught that. I should have known then. Inside the house, Elena had already disappeared upstairs. I heard the guest room door close, the lock click. Polite boundaries, even now. I set my keys on the kitchen counter and stared at the refrigerator. We had one of those family calendar magnets, the kind with dry erase sections for each week. Elena's handwriting dominated it. Seattle conference, board presentation, Phoenix strategy session, Phoenix strategy session. That was this trip, the one she just returned from. But her luggage tag said, Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and the dates didn't match. She'd left 4 days ago. The tag showed she'd checked the bag 3 days ago. Where had she been that first day? I pulled out my phone and opened our shared calendar. Elena had insisted on it years ago, back when we were planning the wedding, said it was important for couples to stay coordinated. I'd agreed because it seemed reasonable. I scrolled back through the past 3 months. Boston conference. October 15th of 17. Denver client meeting, November 2nd of 4. Portland workshop, November 19th of 21. Austin presentation, December 8th of 10. Phoenix strategy session, January 4th, 7. 5 trips. All with specific business purposes listed. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint credit card account, the one we used for all major expenses. Elena had access to it for travel charges, and I reviewed the statements monthly. Basic household financial management. I filtered by her card transactions only. October 16th, dinner at Legal Seafoods, Boston. 2 entrees, November 3rd. Room service at Denver Grand Hotel. Breakfast for 2. November 20th. Wine bar in Portland. $180 tab. December 9th. Steakhouse in Austin. $340. January 5th. Restaurant in Scottsdale. $290. Every trip, every city, meals for 2. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. My hands were steady. My breathing was normal. That's the thing about discovering your wife is having an affair. If you're paying attention, you already knew. You just didn't have confirmation yet. The confirmation doesn't hurt more than the knowing. I closed the laptop and went upstairs, past the guest room where Elena had barricaded herself, went into our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed, and lay down on top of the covers with my shoes still on. The ceiling fan spun slowly above me, the chain clicking with each rotation. It had done that for 6 months. Elena had mentioned it once. I'd said I'd fix it, never did. Some things you just live with. My phone buzzed. Text message. Elena, we should talk logistics tomorrow. I'll need some documents signed. I read it twice. Documents signed. That meant she'd already consulted a lawyer. Already had paperwork drafted. This wasn't a sudden realization in Phoenix. This was planned, timed, calculated. She'd waited until she needed something from me to deliver the news. I typed back, "What kind of documents?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Elena, refinancing papers for the business line of credit. It's in both our names. I need your signature to increase the limit. I stared at that message for a long time. The business line of credit was something Elena had set up 2 years ago when she expanded her consulting firm. Needed capital for hiring, office space, equipment. I'd co-signed because we were married, and her income was our income. The current limit was $150,000. She'd used about $90,000 of it. She wanted to increase it, which meant she was planning something that required more money. Soon. I typed, "When do you need it?" Elena, by Friday. The bank needs the paperwork before they'll approve the new terms. Friday, 3 days from now. I put the phone down without responding and went back to staring at the ceiling fan. Click, click, click. People think revenge is hot, something that burns through you until you explode. They're wrong. Revenge is cold. It's patient. It's the kind of thing that sits in your chest like a stone and waits for exactly the right moment. Elena had just told me she didn't want me anymore. 2 nights later, she'd realized the one thing she needed next was something only I could approve. I smiled at the ceiling. This was going to be interesting. The next morning, Elena was already gone when I came downstairs. Her car wasn't in the driveway. No note, nothing. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. First, I checked her calendar again. Today she'd blocked off as home office day, which usually meant she was working from the guest room or a coffee shop. But her car was gone, so probably the coffee shop. Or maybe not. I opened a new browser tab and did something I'd never done before. I logged into the cloud storage account we shared for household documents, tax returns, insurance policies, that kind of thing. But Elena also backed up her work files there because she was paranoid about losing client data. I found the folder labeled Travel Consulting, Client Files, and started clicking through. Most of it was legitimate. Contracts, proposals, expense reports. But buried in a subfolder labeled Archive 2024, I found a document that didn't fit. It was a lease agreement for an apartment in Tempe, Arizona. Start date, November 1st, 2024. Term, 6 months. Signed by Elena Hargreave and Mark Ellison. Mark Ellison. I opened a new tab and searched the name. Regional real estate developer, based in Scottsdale. Specialized in mixed-use commercial properties. His company, Ellison Development Group, had projects across the Southwest. His headshot showed a man in his early 40s. Square jaw, expensive suit, the kind of smile that sold million-dollar deals. I clicked through to his company's website and found the projects page. Current development. Horizon Towers, a luxury residential complex in Scottsdale. Projected completion, March 2025. I sat back and pieced it together. Elena had been traveling to Arizona repeatedly over the past 3 months. She'd signed a lease on an apartment in Tempe with this developer. She wanted to increase her business line of credit right before a major project completion. She wasn't just having an affair, she was planning to leave. With him, and she needed money to do it. The refinancing wasn't for her business, it was for their future. My phone buzzed. Elena, can you meet me at the house at 2 p.m.? I'll have the papers ready. I looked at the clock. It was 9:30 a.m. I spent the next 4 hours doing research. Mark Ellison's company was impressive on the surface. Big projects, good press, awards for sustainable design. But when I dug into the financial filings, public records since his company took investor money, I found something interesting. Horizon Towers was overleveraged. He'd borrowed heavily against projected sales, but only 60% of the units had sold. The remaining 40% needed to close by March, or the construction loan would default. If that happened, the whole project would collapse. And with it, his reputation. Mark Ellison was living on credit and confidence, and both were fragile. At 2 p.m. exactly, Elena's car pulled into the driveway. I was already sitting at the kitchen table, the refinancing papers she'd emailed me that morning printed and stacked in front of me. I hadn't signed them. She came in through the front door, not the garage, like she didn't quite live here anymore. Thanks for meeting me, she said, setting her bag on the counter. It's my house, too. For now. She sat across from me and slid the papers forward. It's straightforward. Just an increase to the credit limit. Nothing else changes. I picked up the first page and scanned it. She was right. It was simple. Too simple. What's the money for? I asked. Business expansion? What kind of expansion? Does it matter? You're asking me to co-sign another $100,000 in debt. Yeah, it matters. Elena's jaw tightened. I'm opening a second office, Phoenix. There's a lot of opportunity there. Phoenix. Yes. You've been going there a lot lately. That's why I'm expanding there. Who's your partner? Her eyes narrowed. What? You can't open an office alone. You'll need a partner. Local connections? Who is it? That's my business, Daniel. And this is my credit, so it's my business too. We stared at each other across the table. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, I heard a dog barking. Finally, Elena said, I have a potential partner lined up, but it's not finalized yet. Name? Why are you being difficult about this? I'm not being difficult. I'm being cautious. You want me to sign off on $100,000? I want to know it's going somewhere legitimate. Elena stood up. Fine, don't sign it. I'll figure something else out. You'll need to. The deadline is Friday, right? She froze. How did you know that? You told me. I didn't tell you the deadline. I looked at her calmly. Yes, you did. Last night, by Friday. She stared at me, and I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Doubt, maybe, or fear. I'll find another way, she said quietly, and left without taking the papers. I waited until her car disappeared down the street before I allowed myself to smile. Elena thought she still controlled this situation. She thought I was the obstacle she needed to navigate around. She didn't realize the obstacle was the point. That night, I called Alaric Vaughn. Alaric had been my mentor when I first started in financial compliance. He'd retired 3 years ago, but we still met for lunch every few months. He was the person who taught me that most fraud isn't clever. It's just arrogant people assuming no one is paying attention. Daniel, he said when he answered. This is a surprise. You don't usually call after 8. I need advice. Personal or professional? Both, probably. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll put on coffee. Come over. Alaric lived in a small house on the east side of town, the kind of place that looked modest but was worth a fortune because he'd bought it 30 years ago. His living room was lined with bookshelves, and every surface had stacks of financial journals he still read out of habit. He handed me a cup of coffee and sat across from me in a worn leather chair. Talk, he said. I told him everything. Elena's announcement. The trips, the lease in Tempe, Mark Ellison, the refinancing request. Alaric listened without interrupting, his hand steepled under his chin. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. What do you want to do? He finally asked. I don't know yet. Yes, you do. I looked at him. He smiled slightly. I taught you to audit, Daniel. I know how your mind works. You've already built the framework. You just want confirmation you're not crazy. Am I? Crazy? No. Angry? Probably. Justified? Absolutely. What would you do? I'm not you, but if I were, I'd make sure everyone involved understood the cost of underestimating me. How? By being smarter than they think you are, which from what you've told me won't be difficult. He leaned forward. Elena thinks you're the reliable background character in her story. She thinks you'll sign the papers because you always do what's expected. This Mark person probably doesn't even know you exist. That's your advantage. I don't want to break the law. Then don't. Everything you need is already legal. You have access to shared accounts, shared documents, shared decisions. Use them. And then what? Then you wait. People like Elena and Mark, they're operating on confidence. Confidence is fragile. You don't have to push it over. You just have to step aside and let it fall. I drank my coffee and thought about that. Alaric stood and went to one of his bookshelves. He pulled out a slim folder and handed it to me. Public financial records for Ellison Development Group, he said. I pulled them while you were driving over. Hobby of mine, looking into people, old habits. I opened the folder. It was everything I'd found online, plus more. Detailed loan structures, investor agreements, project timelines. He's in trouble, Alaric said. Not obvious trouble. The kind that looks fine until one thing goes wrong, and then it all goes wrong. Like what? Like losing key investors. Like missing deadlines. Like public scrutiny. I looked up at him. I'm not saying you should do anything illegal, Alaric said carefully. I'm saying you should pay attention. And maybe, if opportunities arise to ask questions or share concerns, you take them. I nodded slowly. Also, he added, if Elena doesn't get that refinancing, she'll need to find money elsewhere. That'll create pressure. Pressure creates mistakes. I stood and shook his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just be careful. People are dangerous when they're cornered. I'm counting on it, he smiled. That's my boy. I drove home slowly, thinking through everything Alaric had said. Elena had built her plan on assumptions. She assumed I'd be passive, assumed I'd sign whatever she needed, assumed I'd fade quietly into her past. Mark Ellison had probably made similar assumptions, that Elena's husband was irrelevant, that her money was clean, that nothing would interfere with his project. Assumptions are foundations, and I knew how to find cracks in foundations. When I got home, the house was dark. Elena's car wasn't there. It was nearly 11 p.m. I went inside and pulled up our shared calendar on my phone. She'd updated it 20 minutes ago. New entry. Phoenix, project review, January 10th and 12th. 3 days. Right after the refinancing deadline. She was going back to Arizona. To him. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Started making notes, timelines, connections, vulnerabilities. By the time I went to bed at 2 a.m., I had a plan. It was simple, elegant, patient, and it started with doing absolutely nothing. Friday came and went. I didn't sign the papers. Elena didn't ask again. Instead, she avoided me. Left early, came home late, stayed in the guest room with the door locked. We were two strangers living in the same house, circling each other carefully. I watched. I waited. I noticed. On Saturday morning, Elena got a phone call while she was in the kitchen. I was upstairs, but I could hear her voice through the floor. I know, she said. He won't sign. I'm working on alternatives. Pause. No, I don't think he suspects anything. He's just being stubborn. Longer pause. Mark, I said I'll handle it. Give me a week. She hung up. I stayed where I was, silent. Mark. She'd said his name out loud in our house, like he had a right to be part of this conversation. I pulled out my phone and opened the shared calendar. Elena's Phoenix trip was still scheduled for the 10th, 3 days away. I added my own entry underneath hers. Phoenix, personal business, January 10th and 12th. She'd see it eventually. Wonder what it meant. Let her wonder. Sunday afternoon, I went to the office. My company is one of those mid-sized financial firms that looks boring from the outside but handles hundreds of millions in client assets. I'd worked there for 9 years, and I had access to databases most employees never used. I logged into the commercial credit monitoring system we subscribed to. It tracked business loans, credit applications, financial red flags. We used it to vet vendors and partners. I typed in Ellison Development Group. The results came back immediately. Recent credit inquiry, January 3rd. Amount $2.5 million. Purpose, construction bridge loan. Status, pending. Lender, Western Capital Trust. I wrote down the lender's name and searched for their public contact information. Found it. Saved it. Then I ran a deeper search on Horizon Towers itself. Public records showed the project had 62 units sold out of 105, 30% occupancy rate secured, but the construction loan required 70% by closing. They were short 13 units. Each unit averaged $480,000. That meant Mark Ellison needed to close roughly $6 million in sales in the next 2 months, or his loan would default. $6 million in a softening real estate market. That's when I found the investor list. Horizon Towers had 12 primary investors, all listed in the LLC filing documents. Most were local real estate groups or private equity funds, but one name stood out. Elena Hargreave Consulting, LLC. Investment amount, $50,000. Date, November 15th, 2024. I sat back in my chair and let that sink in. She wasn't just sleeping with him. She was invested in his project. That changed everything. If Horizon Towers failed, she'd lose her money. And if she'd told Mark she could bring in more, through that refinancing, for example, and then couldn't deliver, she'd lose more than money. She'd lose him. That was her vulnerability. I screenshot the investor list and emailed it to myself on a secure account Elena didn't know about. Then I cleared my search history and logged out. When I got home, Elena's car was in the driveway. I found her in the living room, laptop open, papers spread across the coffee table. "Working?" I asked. She didn't look up. Always. I sat in the chair across from her. She glanced up, wary. "I saw you added a Phoenix trip to the calendar," she said. "Yeah. Why?" Personal business? What kind of personal business? My kind. Her jaw tightened. Are you following me? Why would I follow you? Because you're acting strange. Strange how? You're too calm. I leaned back and crossed my arms. What do you want me to be, Elena? Angry? Crying? Would that make you more comfortable? I want you to be honest. I am being honest. You said you didn't want me anymore. I accepted that. Now I'm living my life. By coincidentally going to Phoenix the same weekend I am? It's a big city. She stared at me for a long moment, then closed her laptop. Fine, she said. Do whatever you want. She left the room. I stayed in the chair, staring at the papers she'd left behind. One of them was face up. A contract for consulting services in Phoenix. Client name, Ellison Development Group. Services, strategic travel planning for investor events. Fee, $25,000. Dated January 2nd, 2025. She'd invoiced him. For services she probably never performed, Mark Ellison was paying her through her business, funneling money to her in a way that looked legitimate on paper. That was fraud. Small scale, maybe, but fraud nonetheless. I took a photo of the contract with my phone, then straightened the papers like I'd never touched them. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Then I drove to Tempe, Arizona. It took 8 hours straight through. I stopped once for gas and coffee, then kept going. The apartment Elena had leased was in a bland complex near the university. 2-story buildings painted beige, identical landscaping, numbered parking spots. I parked across the street and waited. At 3 p.m., a silver Mercedes pulled into spot 214. Mark Ellison got out. He looked exactly like his photo. Tall, confident, expensive watch catching the sunlight. He carried a leather briefcase and walked to Unit 214 like he owned it, which legally he did. Half of it anyway. I watched him unlock the door and go inside. 40 minutes later, he came back out. Got in his car, left. I waited another hour, then walked up to the apartment and knocked. No answer. I tried the door, locked. I went back to my car and called the apartment complex office. Hi, I said. I'm calling about Unit 214. I think my wife and I are interested in a similar floor plan. Is there any way I could see that unit? The woman on the phone hesitated. That unit is currently leased. Oh, do you know when the lease is up? We're flexible on timing. I'm sorry, I can't share tenant information. Of course, thanks anyway. I hung up and sat there, thinking. I couldn't get inside the apartment, but I didn't need to. I just needed to know it existed, and I needed Mark Ellison to know I knew. I drove back to the complex at 7 p.m. after dark. I parked in the guest lot, walked up to Unit 214, and taped a plain white envelope to the door. Inside, the envelope was a single piece of paper. It said, I know about Horizon Towers. No signature, no return address, nothing. Then I drove home. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Elena. I called her back. Where were you yesterday? She demanded. I told you. Personal business. You didn't go to work. No. Where did you go? Does it matter? Daniel, I swear to God. I went for a drive. Cleared my head. Is that okay with you? She was breathing hard. Mark got a threatening note at his apartment. What kind of note? Someone left it on his door. It said something about Horizon Towers. Sounds like he has enemies. Daniel? What? You think I did it? Why would I care about his apartment? How do you even know it was his apartment? I paused. Let the silence stretch. You just told me it was, I said finally. She hung up. I smiled at my phone. The note had worked exactly as planned. Mark was rattled. Elena was panicking, and I was 8 hours away with no proof I'd ever been there. Over the next 2 days, I watched the situation spiral. Elena canceled her Phoenix trip, changed it to a video call instead. She paced the house constantly, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and tense. Mark stopped calling the house phone, started texting instead. I didn't intercept the texts, didn't need to. I could hear enough through the walls. I don't know who it was. No, he doesn't know about us. Just calm down. It's probably nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I knew that. And somewhere in the back of Mark's mind, he knew it too. On Wednesday, I got an email from Western Capital Trust. It was addressed to me personally, not through work, which meant someone had searched for my contact information specifically. The email said, Mr. Hargreave, we received a concern regarding Ellison Development Group's recent credit application. As a co-signed party on related financial instruments, we wanted to inform you of our due diligence review. Please contact us if you have any questions. I read it 3 times. Someone had flagged Mark's loan application. Someone had connected it to Elena's business line of credit, which I'd co-signed. Someone had raised enough questions that the bank was now reviewing the whole thing. That someone was me. I'd called Western Capital Trust on Monday morning before I drove to Phoenix, identified myself as a financial compliance analyst, said I had concerns about potential fraud related to an investment my spouse had made without my knowledge. I didn't accuse anyone directly, just asked questions. That's all it takes. Banks are paranoid. Once you plant a seed of doubt, they investigate everything, and Mark Ellison's credit application was now under review, which meant his bridge loan was delayed, which meant Horizon Towers was in trouble. I forwarded the email to Elena without comment. She called me immediately. What did you do? I got an email, so I forwarded it to you. Thought you should know. Did you call the bank? Why would I call the bank? Daniel, if you sabotaged Mark's loan, I didn't sabotage anything. I don't even know what loan you're talking about. You're lying. Prove it. She hung up again. That night, I heard her crying in the guest room. I stood outside the door and listened. Not because I felt guilty, because I wanted to hear exactly how much power I had. The answer was, more than she thought. On Thursday, Alaric called me. How's it going? He asked. Falling apart nicely. Be careful, Daniel. Wounded animals bite. I'm staying out of reach. Good, keep it that way. We hung up, and I went back to watching. Friday morning, Elena left the house early. Didn't say where she was going. I checked the shared calendar. She'd removed all her entries. That meant she was trying to hide her movements, which meant I'd gotten to her. I spent the day at home, working on my laptop. Around 3 p.m., I got a notification from our credit monitoring service. New inquiry. Daniel Hargreave Consulting, LLC. Amount, $75,000. Lender, Regional Business Bank. Status, denied. She'd tried to get another loan, without telling me, and she'd been rejected. That meant she was desperate, and desperation makes people reckless. I waited for her to come home so I could see what she'd do next. She didn't come home that night, or the next. On Sunday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "We need to talk, Mark Ellison." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "About what, Mark?" "You know what? Me, I don't think I do. Mark, meet me. Tomorrow, Phoenix. I'll send you the address." I didn't respond. An hour later, he sent the address anyway. A construction site, Horizon Towers. I smiled and saved the address. He wanted to meet face to face. That was a mistake. I flew to Phoenix on Monday morning. Didn't tell Elena, didn't tell anyone. Just booked a ticket under my own name, packed a small bag, and left. The flight was 2 hours. I spent it reading everything I could find about Mark Ellison. His LinkedIn profile was polished, headshots at construction sites, handshaking with investors, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Every post was about vision, growth, opportunity, but the comments told a different story. Under his most recent post about Horizon Towers, someone had written, "Still waiting on those promised timelines." Another, "Third delay this year. Not impressed." The comments were weeks old, but they were still there. Public doubts from people who'd given him money. I screenshot them and saved them to a folder I'd started keeping. Evidence, but not for court. For leverage. The plane landed at 11 a.m. I rented a car and drove straight to the Horizon Towers construction site. It was impressive, I'd give him that. 12 stories of glass and steel rising out of the desert, surrounded by equipment and scaffolding. A sign near the entrance showed a rendering of the finished building, all clean lines and luxury branding. The parking lot was mostly empty, a few trucks, a trailer that probably served as the site office, and Mark Ellison's silver Mercedes. I parked 50 yards away and waited. At noon exactly, Mark came out of the trailer. He looked around, checking for my car. I'd told him I'd be there, but I hadn't said when. He pulled out his phone, typed something, waited. I let him wait. After 10 minutes, he got frustrated and went back inside. I waited another 20 minutes, then got out of my car and walked across the lot. The trailer door was unlocked. I opened it without knocking. Mark was sitting at a desk covered in blueprints and permit documents. He looked up when I came in, and I saw him do a quick assessment. Who I was, what threat I posed. I'm not physically intimidating. Average height, thin build, glasses. I look like someone who works behind a desk, which is exactly why people underestimate me. "You're Daniel," he said. "I am." "Thanks for coming." "You asked me to." He gestured to a chair. "Sit." I stayed standing. He frowned. "Look, I know this is uncomfortable." "Do you?" But I think we both want the same thing. Which is? For the situation to resolve quietly. I looked at him. Really looked. Expensive suit, perfect hair, that practiced confidence people use when they're selling something. What situation? I asked. His jaw tightened. Don't play games. I'm not. You asked me here. I came. But I don't know what you think I can help you with. You've been interfering with my business. Have I? The note at my apartment. The call to the bank. You think I don't know that was you? I didn't leave any note, and I didn't call any bank. You're lying, I shrugged. Prove it. He stood up, walked around the desk, stood too close to me using his height. Here's what's going to happen, he said quietly. You're going to stop whatever you're doing. You're going to leave Elena alone. You're going to sign the papers she needs, and then you're going to disappear from this situation. I met his eyes. Or what? Or I make things very difficult for you. How? However I need to. We stood there for a moment, 2 feet apart, and I felt something shift in the air. He expected me to back down, expected me to be intimidated. Instead, I smiled. You have 62 units sold, I said quietly. Out of 105. Your construction loan requires 73. You need 11 more units to close in the next 8 weeks, or Western Capital pulls your bridge financing. If that happens, you default on the primary loan. If you default, you lose everything. This building, your reputation, your company. His face went pale. You're also overleveraged on 3 other projects, I continued. Smaller ones, but they're all tied to the same credit structure. If Horizon falls, they all fall. You're living on borrowed time and borrowed money, and the only thing keeping you afloat is confidence. But confidence is fragile. One bad review, one investor asking the wrong questions, one article in the local business journal, and it all collapses. He didn't move. So here's what's actually going to happen, I said. You're going to stop seeing my wife. You're going to return any money she's invested with you. You're going to cancel any contracts you have with her company. And you're going to do it quietly today before I decide to ask more questions publicly. You can't. Yes, I can. I'm a financial compliance analyst. It's literally my job to find irregularities. And you're covered in them. His hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. I hoped he would. Because then I could file a police report and this whole thing would become official. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped back and forced a smile. You're making a mistake, he said. Probably. But it's mine to make. I turned and walked out of the trailer. Behind me, I heard something crash. Maybe he threw a chair. Maybe he punched the desk. I didn't look back. I got in my rental car and drove away. But I didn't leave Phoenix. That night, I checked into a hotel near the airport. Used cash. Didn't use my real name. Then I went to a 24-hour print shop and made 50 copies of a document I'd prepared. It was simple. 1 page, professional formatting. The headline read, Investor Alert, Ellison Development Group. Below that, I'd listed the public financial concerns I'd found. The unit sales shortfall, the pending loan review, the project delays, all factual, all sourced, nothing libelous. At the bottom, I'd included a link to the Arizona Corporation Commission's Investor Complaint Hotline. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. At 6 a.m. Tuesday, I drove to the Horizon Towers sales office. It was one of those model units developers set up near the construction site, all staged furniture and fake plants. The door didn't open until 9 a.m., but there were benches outside for potential buyers to sit and admire the view. I taped 25 copies of my investor alert to every surface I could find. Benches, light posts, the directory board. Then I drove to Mark Ellison's office building downtown and did the same thing. Finally, I went to the apartment complex in Tempe and taped the remaining copies to every bulletin board and mailbox cluster I could find. By 8 a.m., I was done. By 9 a.m., I was at the airport. By noon, I was home. Elena was waiting for me in the kitchen. Where were you? She demanded. Phoenix. Her face went white. Why? Personal business, remember? What did you do? Had a conversation. With who? Mark. She grabbed the counter like she needed it for balance. You talked to Mark? He asked me to, so I did. What did you say to him? I asked him to stop seeing my wife. Daniel. Did you know he's in financial trouble? I asked casually. Horizon Towers is falling apart. He's got investors asking questions. The bank put his bridge loan under review. I'd be careful about tying your future to his. She stared at me. You sabotaged him. I pointed out facts. If facts are sabotage, maybe his business wasn't that solid to begin with. You have no right. I have every right. You involved me when you co-signed those loans. You involved me when you used our shared accounts. You involved me when you decided to rebuild your life with someone else's money. I'll get a lawyer. Good. Do that. Get a lawyer. File for divorce. Take what's yours. But you don't get to take what's mine and pretend it was always yours. She started crying. Not because she was sad, because she was trapped. I walked past her and went upstairs. Wednesday morning, I woke up to an email from Western Capital Trust. It said, Mr. Hargreave, after completing our due diligence review, we have decided to decline the bridge loan application for Ellison Development Group. Thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. I forwarded it to Elena without comment. She didn't respond. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. You think you're smart, Mark Ellison said. His voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. I think I'm careful, I replied. You just destroyed my project. No, your bad planning destroyed your project. I just asked questions. I know where you live. So does the police department. If anything happens to me or my property, there's a file with my lawyer that connects you to it, complete with recordings of this call. I wasn't recording, but he didn't know that. He was silent for a long time. You're going to regret this, he finally said. Maybe, but you're going to regret it more. I hung up, and then I waited. Because the thing about threats is that people rarely follow through. They just want you to think they will. But I wasn't afraid of Mark Ellison. I was counting on him being afraid of me. Thursday morning, I got a call from Elena's operations manager, Rachel Moore. I'd met Rachel once at an office party 2 years ago. She was efficient, smart, and completely loyal to Elena. Or so I'd thought. Mr. Hargreave, she said, can we talk? About? Elena's business, and your role in it. I don't have a role in it. You co-signed the line of credit. That's not a role, that's a legal obligation, which you're now using as leverage. I paused. Did Elena ask you to call me? No, this is my idea, because I think you and I want the same thing. Which is? For this situation to end without destroying everything. I thought about that. Keep talking. Elena's business is legitimate, Rachel said. She's built something real, but she's made bad personal choices that are now affecting her professional life. If you keep pushing, you'll take down the whole company, including me and the 3 other people who work there. That's not my problem. It could be your solution. How? Let me buy out Elena's share of the company. I've been trying to convince her to sell for months anyway. You help me make it happen, and you get your signature off all the financial documents. Clean break. I leaned back in my chair. Why would you want to buy her out? Because she's going to tank the company if she doesn't. She's distracted, she's making reckless decisions, and I'm not going down with her. Loyalty. Has limits, and Elena crossed mine. I smiled. How much is the company worth? About $200,000, but I'd offer her $150,000 for her 70% stake. You'd need to agree to it as the co-signer. And if I don't? Then the business collapses in the next 3 months, and no one gets anything. I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. Send me the proposal. I'll review it. Thank you, Mr. Hargreave. Call me Daniel. And Rachel? Yes? Don't tell Elena we talked. I won't. She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. Rachel was smart. She'd seen which way the wind was blowing and decided to switch sides before she got swept away. That was the thing about loyalty. It lasted exactly as long as the situation was stable. The moment things started to crack, people scattered. Friday afternoon, Mark Ellison's Mercedes appeared in my driveway. I watched from the upstairs window as he got out and walked to my front door. He knocked. I didn't answer. He knocked again, harder. I opened the window. I'm not home, I called down. He looked up. We need to talk. No, we don't. I'm not leaving until we do. Then you're trespassing. I'll call the police in 5 minutes if you're still here. He stared at me. You're destroying my life. You destroyed mine first. I didn't even know you existed. Exactly. He stood there for another moment, then got back in his car and left. I watched him drive away, then went downstairs and checked the front door. He'd left something, an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000, made out to Elena Hargreave Consulting, LLC. A note attached said, "Full refund of investment. Tell your husband I'm done." I took a photo of it and texted it to Elena. She called immediately. Is that real? It's in my hand. He's returning my money? Apparently. Why? Because I told him to. She was silent. He's cutting ties, Elena. He's protecting himself. That's what people like him do when things get dangerous. They save themselves. This isn't over. she said quietly. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. I hung up and deposited the check into our joint account. Legally, it was hers, but legally, half of it was mine. By Saturday, 3 things had happened. First, Rachel sent me the buyout proposal. It was thorough, professional, fair. Second, Elena received a formal notice from Western Capital Trust that all shared credit accounts between her business and my name were being closed. Third, Mark Ellison announced a 6-month construction delay on Horizon Towers. The local business journal ran a short piece about it, buried on page 6. But it was there. Elena saw all 3 things happen in the same day, and I watched her realize what I'd done. I'd severed every connection she had to Mark. Professionally, financially, personally. I'd cut off her funding, her business partner, her escape plan, and I'd done it without breaking a single law. Sunday morning, she came into the kitchen where I was drinking coffee. I'll sign the divorce papers, she said quietly. Good. And I'll sell the company to Rachel. Smart. But I want something from you. What? I want you to stop. I looked at her. Stop what? Whatever you're planning next. I'm not planning anything, Elena. I'm just living my life. She didn't believe me, but it didn't matter, because I was telling the truth. I didn't need to plan anything else. The structure was already collapsing. All I had to do was watch. The divorce papers arrived on Monday. Elena's lawyer had drafted them quickly. Simple division of assets, no alimony, clean break. She wanted this over. I read through them carefully, twice. Everything looked standard except for one section. Under business assets, it listed Elena Hargreave Consulting, LLC, valued at $200,000. The papers specified that as part of the divorce settlement, Elena would buy out my co-signer status for $20,000, and I would relinquish all claim to the company. I set the papers down and smiled. She thought she was keeping the company. She didn't know Rachel had already contacted me, and she definitely didn't know what I'd done 3 weeks ago. On the day Elena first asked me to sign the refinancing papers, I'd filed a legal document with the Secretary of State's office. It was a UCC-1 financing statement, a public record that established a secured interest in a business asset. In this case, I'd claimed a security interest in Elena Hargreave Consulting, LLC, based on my co-signer status on the line of credit. That document meant that if the company was sold or transferred, I had the legal right to approve the transaction. Elena's lawyer probably hadn't checked for it. They should have. I called Rachel. Did you get the papers? I asked. I did. Are you going to sign? Not yet. I need to talk to Elena first. About what? My own terms. I heard Rachel pause. Daniel, we had an agreement. We still do, but Elena doesn't know about it yet, and I'd like to tell her in my own way. How? In person, tomorrow. Can you set up a meeting at the office? You, me, Elena, and your lawyer if you have one. This sounds like a trap. It's not. It's just leverage, and I promise by the end of it, you'll get exactly what you want. She was quiet for a long time. Fine, she said. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Thank you. I hung up and looked at the divorce papers again. Elena thought this was ending on her terms. She was about to learn otherwise. The meeting was at Elena's office, a small suite in a business complex near the airport. I arrived at 9:55 a.m. Rachel was already there, along with a man I assumed was her lawyer. Elena showed up at 10:02, looking tired. What's this about? She asked immediately. Your divorce papers, I said. I gave you what you asked for. Not quite. I pulled out a folder and set it on the conference table. 3 weeks ago, I said, I filed a UCC-1 financing statement establishing a secured interest in your company. That means I have a legal claim on any sale or transfer of the business. Elena's face went pale. You what? I protected my cosigner investment. It's standard practice when you're involved in business financing. You can't do that. I already did. It's public record. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered something to her. She looked at me. What do you want? I want the buyout to go through. I want Rachel to purchase your 70% stake. I want you out of this company completely. Then why are we here? Because you tried to cut me out. The divorce papers say I get $20,000 to relinquish my claim. That's insulting. How much do you want? Rachel asked carefully. I want 30% of the company's value. That's $60,000. Elena laughed. You're insane. Am I? I co-signed a line of credit that funded most of your early growth. I took on legal liability for your business decisions. And now you want to buy me out for $20,000? That's not fair. That's theft. Rachel looked at her lawyer. He nodded slightly. I'll agree to it, Rachel said. I'll pay you $60,000 for your secured interest. Elena stood up. This is ridiculous. I'm not agreeing to any of this. You don't have to, I said calmly. But if you don't, I'll block the sale. And if I block the sale, your company stays tied to the line of credit, which means every decision you make requires my signature. Every contract, every expense over $5,000, every client agreement, I'll be your business partner whether you like it or not. That's blackmail. No, it's a legal consequence of your financial structure. You should have thought about that before you involved me. She stared at me. I can't believe you're doing this. Really? Because I can't believe you thought you'd get away with any of this without consequences. Rachel stood. Elena, take the deal. Excuse me? Take the deal. Daniel's right. If he blocks the sale, the company is stuck. And if the company is stuck, we both lose. Just take the deal and move on. Elena looked between us, and I saw the realization hit her. Rachel wasn't on her side anymore. No one was. Fine, she said quietly. But I want this over today. It will be, I said, as soon as the paperwork is filed. Rachel's lawyer pulled out a revised agreement he'd apparently prepared in advance. Smart. He'd anticipated this. Elena signed. Rachel signed. I signed. And just like that, Elena Hargreave Consulting, LLC, changed ownership. Elena stood and walked out without another word. I stayed behind with Rachel. You planned this, she said. I planned contingencies. There's a difference. You manipulated her. I protected myself. There's a difference there, too. Rachel smiled slightly. Well, for what it's worth, you just saved my company. Good. Build something better with it. I left the office and drove home. When I got there, Elena's car was already in the driveway. I found her in the guest room, packing. You got what you wanted, she said without looking at me. I got what I was owed. Same thing. Not really. She zipped her suitcase and turned to face me. Do you feel better now? I feel fair. You destroyed Mark's project. You took my company. You humiliated me. And you're calling that fair? You started an affair. You lied for months. You used my credit and my signature to fund a life you were planning without me. And you expected me to just accept it, so yeah, I call this fair. She picked up her suitcase. I'm staying with a friend until the divorce is finalized. Fine. And Daniel? What? You're not as smart as you think you are. Maybe, but I'm smarter than you thought I was, and that's all that mattered. She left. I stood in the empty guest room and listened to her car pull away. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. Because 2 days later, Mark Ellison showed up at my office. He walked past reception, ignored the assistant who tried to stop him, and came straight to my desk. We need to talk, he said. I looked up calmly. No, we don't. Yes, we do. He dropped a folder on my desk. What's this? I asked. Proof. Of what? That you've been sabotaging me for weeks. Calls to investors, anonymous complaints to the city planning board, emails to journalists. I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, phone records, screenshots of messages, all of them pointing to a campaign of targeted harassment against Mark Ellison and Horizon Towers. None of them from me. I didn't send these, I said. Bull. I didn't. Check the IP addresses, check the phone numbers, none of them traced to me. He leaned over my desk. Then who did? I don't know. You're lying. I'm not. But if you're getting complaints from multiple sources, maybe that says something about your business. He grabbed the folder and straightened up. I'm going to find out who's doing this. And when I do, I'm going to make sure they regret it. Good luck with that. He left. I sat at my desk and thought about those emails. Someone was going after Mark Ellison. Someone who knew about Horizon Towers, about the investor problems, about everything I'd discovered. Someone who had access to the same information I did. That night, I called Alaric. Did you send complaints about Mark Ellison to anyone? I asked. No? Why? He thinks someone's running a harassment campaign against him. Emails, calls, complaints to the city. And you think it's me? I think it's someone who knows what I know. Alaric was quiet for a moment. Daniel, I didn't send anything, but I did mention your situation to a colleague of mine, former SEC investigator. He sometimes does freelance research for attorneys. Why would you do that? Because I wanted a second opinion on Ellison's financials. I thought if there was something criminal going on, someone should know about it. Who's the colleague? His name is Peter Gaines. I'll send you his contact info. Did you tell him to file complaints? No, I told him about the situation. What he did with that information is his business. I hung up and pulled up Peter Gaines online, former SEC investigator, like Alaric said, now worked as a private consultant, specialized in financial fraud cases. He had a blog where he posted about securities violations and investor protection. His most recent post was titled, Red Flags in Arizona Real Estate Development. It was about Horizon Towers. I read the whole thing. It was detailed, thorough, accurate, and it included information I'd never shared with anyone, like the names of specific investors who'd complained about Mark Ellison, like internal project timelines that weren't public record, like financial structures that required access to private company documents. Peter Gaines hadn't just done research, he'd gone digging, and somewhere in that digging, he'd found something I'd missed. I called him. "This is Daniel Hargreave," I said. "Alaric Vaughn gave me your name." "I've been expecting your call," Peter said. "You wrote about Horizon Towers." "I did." "Where did you get your information?" "Public records, mostly. Some investor complaints, and one very interesting anonymous tip." "From who?" "A woman named Rachel Moore." I went cold. "Rachel contacted you?" I asked. "About 2 weeks ago. Said she had concerns about her employer's involvement with a potentially fraudulent real estate project. Asked if I'd look into it. I did." "Why would she do that?" "Because she wanted to protect herself. She knew Elena's company was tied to Mark Ellison's project. She knew if it collapsed, she'd go down with it. So she fed me information to make sure the collapse happened cleanly. She used you. She used me the same way you used Alaric, for strategic advantage." I sat back in my chair. "Did she tell you about me?" "She mentioned that Elena's husband was involved. Said you were the one who first raised concerns about Ellison's financials. But I did my own verification. Everything I published is sourced. And the complaints to the city, the emails to journalists, those were me, based on the evidence Rachel provided. I submitted formal complaints to the appropriate agencies. That's what I do." I didn't respond. "Mr. Hargreave," Peter said, "you started something, but you didn't control where it went. That's how these things work. You knock over the first domino and the rest fall on their own. Is Ellison in serious trouble?" "The city planning board is reviewing his permits. The SEC is looking into his investor disclosures. His financing is frozen. So yes, I'd say he's in serious trouble." "Will he lose everything?" "Probably, but that's not your fault. It's his. You just exposed what was already there." I hung up and sat in the dark. Rachel had played all of us. She'd used me to pressure Elena. She'd used Peter to destroy Mark. And she'd positioned herself to take over the company once the dust settled. She was smarter than I'd given her credit for. The next day, I drove to Elena's office, Rachel's office now. She was at her desk, working on her laptop. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up. "About?" "Peter Gaines." She smiled. "Ah, you contacted him?" "I did. Why?" "Because I needed Mark Ellison out of the picture, and you'd already done half the work. I just finished it. You used me. We used each other, and we both got what we wanted." I sat down across from her. "What exactly did you tell Peter?" "Everything I knew, which was a lot. Elena was careless with her records. I had access to all her client files, all her financial documents, including the ones related to Mark. So you handed him everything." "I handed him the truth. What he did with it was his choice." "You destroyed Mark's project. Mark destroyed his own project. I just made sure it happened faster. I studied her. You're not who I thought you were. Neither are you. Alaric told me you were methodical. He was right. You talked to Alaric?" "Of course, before I called you. I wanted to make sure you were someone I could work with." She leaned back in her chair. "Daniel, you and I both saw the same problem. Elena was tied to a sinking ship. The only question was whether we went down with her or not. I chose not. So did you. And now? Now I have a company. You have your freedom. And Elena has exactly what she deserves." "Which is?" "Nothing." I stood up. "I'm done with this." "I know. That's why you're here. To make sure there are no loose ends." "Are there?" "No. Peter's investigation is focused on Mark, not you. The SEC doesn't care about you. The city doesn't care about you. You're completely clean." "And Elena?" "Is irrelevant." I walked to the door, then stopped. "Rachel," I said, "don't ever contact me again." "I won't need to." I left. That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Hargreave?" a woman's voice said. "Yes." "This is Detective Sarah Kimball with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling about a complaint filed by Mark Ellison. My stomach dropped. What kind of complaint? He's alleging harassment, stalking, interference with his business. Your name came up during the investigation. I haven't done anything illegal. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just gathering information. Can we schedule a time to talk? Am I being charged with something? No, this is just a preliminary inquiry. Then I'd prefer to speak with my lawyer present. That's your right. Have your lawyer contact me. She gave me her number and hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. Mark had filed a police complaint. He was trying to turn this around on me, and I just told a detective I wanted a lawyer, which made me look guilty. I called Alaric. I need a lawyer, I said. Now. The lawyer's name was David Brennan. He specialized in civil disputes and had worked with Alaric before. We met at his office the next morning. Tell me everything, he said. I did. The affair, the financial discoveries, the conversations with Mark, the note on his door, the calls to the bank, the complaints Peter Gaines filed. David listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You're not in legal trouble, he said. The police called. They called to ask questions. That's not the same as charging you. And from what you've described, you haven't broken any laws. What about the note on his door? Was it threatening? No, it just said I knew about Horizon Towers. That's not illegal. Annoying, maybe, but not illegal. What about the bank calls? You're a co-signer on related financial documents. You have the right to ask questions. That's not harassment. That's due diligence. So I'm safe? From criminal charges? Yes. From a civil lawsuit? Maybe not. Mark Ellison could try to sue you for interfering with his business, but he'd have to prove damages, and frankly, his business was already failing before you got involved. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. What should I do about the detective? I asked. I'll call her. Explain that you're declining to give a statement at this time. If she wants to pursue it further, she'll need to formally charge you, which she won't because she doesn't have a case. And if Mark pushes it, then we push back. But my guess is he won't. He's too busy trying to save his project. David was right. Detective Kimball never called back, and Mark Ellison never filed a lawsuit. Because 2 weeks later, Horizon Towers collapsed completely. The City Planning Board revoked his permits based on safety violations Peter Gaines had uncovered. The SEC opened a formal investigation into his investor disclosures. And Western Capital Trust accelerated the construction loan, demanding immediate payment. Mark couldn't pay. On February 15th, Ellison Development Group filed for bankruptcy. I saw the announcement in the local business journal online. It was a small article, 2 paragraphs, buried on page 8, but it was there. Mark Ellison's company was done, and with it, his reputation. That same day, I got an email from Elena. It said, I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. 3 days later, I got another email. This one was longer. Daniel, I know you think you won. And maybe you did. You took my company. You destroyed Mark's business. You made me look like the villain in all of this. But you didn't win anything real. You're still alone. You're still angry. And you're still living in that house with nothing but your pride. I'm moving on. I'm rebuilding. And I'll be fine without you. Can you say the same? Elena. I read it twice, then I deleted it. She was wrong about one thing. I wasn't angry. I was calm. For the first time in months, I felt completely, perfectly calm. On March 1st, the divorce was finalized. No ceremony, no drama, just paperwork. Elena signed her half at her lawyer's office. I signed mine at home. We never saw each other again. That should have been the end. But I wanted one more thing. I wanted Mark Ellison to know exactly who had beaten him. On March 10th, I drove back to Phoenix. I didn't tell anyone, didn't plan it in advance, just got in my car and went. I arrived at the Horizon Towers construction site around noon. The place was abandoned. No workers, no equipment, just a half-finished building standing empty against the sky. A chain-link fence surrounded the property now, with signs warning about trespassing. I parked across the street and waited. At 2 p.m., Mark Ellison's Mercedes pulled up. He got out and stood at the fence, staring at the building. I got out of my car and walked over. He didn't notice me until I was standing next to him. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Neither should you. He looked at me. Come to gloat? No, I came to tell you something. What? You were never going to succeed, even without me. Your project was overleveraged. Your investors were nervous. Your timelines were unrealistic. You were building on sand, and it was always going to collapse. You helped it collapse. I accelerated what was already happening, but I didn't cause it. He turned back to the building. I lost everything. So did I. My marriage, my trust, my belief that people are fundamentally honest. That's not the same. No, it's worse. Because you chose to fail. I didn't choose any of this. He was quiet for a long time. I didn't love her, he said finally. What? Elena, I didn't love her. It was just convenient. Convenient. She had money. She had connections. She was willing to help me when everyone else was walking away. That's all it was. I stared at him. You destroyed my marriage for convenience. I destroyed my own life for the same reason. He got in his car and drove away. I stood at the fence for another hour, looking at the empty building. All of this, the lies, the revenge, the collapse, had been for something that meant nothing. Not to him, not to Elena. Maybe not even to me anymore. I drove home. When I got there, the house was dark and empty. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table. My phone was off. My laptop was closed. The calendar on the refrigerator was blank. I had no plans, no obligations, no one expecting anything from me. I was completely, utterly free, and I had no idea what to do with it. But I knew one thing. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed Mark or taken Elena's company or exposed the fraud. I'd won because I'd proven something to myself. I wasn't the quiet, forgettable man everyone thought I was. I was the man who'd built the trap and watched them all walk into it, and I'd done it without rage, without violence, without breaking the law. I'd done it with patience, with precision, with the cold, calculated efficiency of someone who knew exactly how systems worked, and how to make them fail. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee, I opened my laptop, and I started looking for a new job, somewhere far from here, somewhere no one knew my name, somewhere I could start over, because that's what you do when you win. You walk away, you don't look back, you don't gloat, you just leave, and you let the ruins speak for themselves.